Next up, we have Phil Donahue talking about how everything's been turned upside down. He's talking about Ron Paul and the criticism on the right wing about his foreign policy ideas, and they will go on and on about how Ron Paul is so dangerous and his ideas are so cranky and nutty. How how is it cranky and nutty to say that our invading Iran isn't a good idea, or attacking Iran is not a sane policy, and that our troops need to come back home from overseas? Our troops are at risk overseas, and we keep getting ourselves deeper and deeper and more deeply involved in different countries, and our results in these countries aren't necessarily good. We spent I don't know how many years now in Iraq, and we just withdrew most of our troops, and it doesn't seem that we've accomplished anything. Bombs going off in Baghdad, Shiites and Sunnis killing each other, and one of the leading Sunni officials, I'm not sure if he's president or who he is, vice president or whoever, he's hiding out in northern Iraq from Maliki, the prime minister or the president. It just doesn't sound like a functioning democracy, which is what we're supposed to be. That's what we're supposed to have established there, but it doesn't really work. The president Maliki is just doing whatever he chooses. He's accused the Sunni leadership of running militias, assassinating various government officials, which he hasn't produced any proof so far. I mean, it's not anything to say that we've accomplished our goals at all. What was the whole purpose of being involved in Iraq for so many years? Is it any more safer for democracy? And let's go on and on about the WMDs and all that, but they never found any WMDs. And then we have the Iranians, who seem to be wielding a lot of influence in Iraq. So we've empowered the Iranians without establishing any type of real democracy as a sovereign country, a sovereign democracy that isn't under the control of a foreign power, which is Iran. And Iran is supposed to be our chief enemy. Previous to our invasion, Saddam Hussein could never be influenced by Iranian policy. Iran was the bitter enemy, and Iraq served as a counterweight to Iran. Now that counterweight is gone, and Iran has substantial influence in Iraq. But let's listen to Phil Donahue for a minute talking about Ron Paul.
The bottom line is, I don't want to make people's lives better by giving them somebody else's money. I want to give them the opportunity to go out and earn the money and provide for themselves and their families.
Well, this is Rick Santorum.
Time moment on New Year's Day. Back with me now. Man who has some strong views on politics. Phil Donahue. What do you make of the Rick Santorum surge?
Yeah, Rick Santorum surge. I mean, Rick Santorum surge. It's a media surge. You know, the idea that Rick Santorum is going to go anywhere in the race is just crazy. I mean, he can't beat Barack Obama. You know, his ideas on running around, he's going to run across the country attacking gay people, and this is going to build support for him. You know, where's his electability? Some states have legalized gay marriage, and it's a large portion of the electorate who supports gay marriage. So I don't know how he could possibly get elected attacking gays. I mean, up north, you know, in Iowa, maybe the Iowa evangelicals, it's crazy. I don't have the slightest idea how they can vote for the guy. Attacking gays, and apparently at one point he compared gay men to man-animal relations or something. Men and dogs. I don't know. It's just complete insanity. You know, what two men do, I don't think most Americans want to get involved in that. I don't honestly want to talk about it. It's not a subject that I enjoy discussing. It's just insane. It's insane. You know, I'll leave that to the gay man. I don't know why him as a straight man, why he wants to run across the country even talking about it. But it's funny how, excuse me, it's funny how he talks about gay men. Why does he talk about the women? Why is it always about the gay men? You know, come on. Two women having a relationship. He doesn't want to talk about that. What's the reason? You know, let's get real. Because men don't have a problem with seeing two women together. That's the reason. And to think that because it's two men, we gotta somehow get involved, that's, again, insane. Yeah, let's listen to Donahue on Ron Paul, and Piers Morgan and Donahue.
And one of many. I saw him commenting on the Straits of Hormuz. He's got both guns out. He's already angry. You can see it.
This is still Santorum.
And you can hear the drums in the background. And the heartbeat accelerates. He wants to go after Iran. I mean, how many wars do you want to have in your lifetime? How many bombs are you going to drop? I just think it looks like we've become a warrior nation. We bombed Grenada. We are dropping bombs on crowded cities at night where old people and children are sleeping. And we're watching it on CNN. And
it's interesting there that he said CNN, that he mentioned CNN. We're watching it on CNN, and also probably, you know, Fox and MSNBC, etc. But war is actually CNN's lifeblood. Any big event is CNN's lifeblood. You know, their ratings go way up when anything happens, especially war. So in that way, CNN has a vested interest in seeing war. They want to see war happen because they have a financial interest in it as a cable news network that focuses on events, big events. Let's go back to it. The donkey.
The only voice that's spoken up at all in this campaign about this is Ron Paul. Why are we so interventionist, he wants to know? What are we doing with all these wars? How are we safer? These are very common sense observations, and no other candidate can possibly speak those words. It would be, they believe, politically fatal. Now think about that. You can't use an anti-war platform to get elected. So maybe that explains why it's so easy for us to go to war.
Okay, he says you can't use an anti-war platform. Of course, that's the platform Ron Paul is using, and to say you can't use it is not necessarily correct. Yes, the right wing and the left wing is attacking him on it. The so-called liberals and the right wing are attacking him for his platform. They call him nutty, cranky. But he's running on it, and he got over 20% of the vote in Iowa. That's just part of the media narrative that people are for intervention overseas, that people support all the wars, when it's not necessarily the case. It's just the establishment. They are against anybody who is against the interventionism. When I say the establishment, I don't just mean the right wing or the left wing. I mean both of them. President Obama has totally continued President Bush's policies overseas. And he's implemented new policies in relation to those policies, such as the indefinite detention, part of the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Act. He hasn't throttled any of that stuff back. That was all that stuff, the Patriot Act, FISA, all that stuff that was implemented under President Bush. None of that has been throttled back. He's only enlarged it, encouraged it. When he went to war in Libya, President Obama didn't properly authorize it. So the question becomes, what is the difference between the right wing and the left wing? There isn't really a difference. It's all the establishment powers and the establishment in the media. They control it. They control the whole dialogue, and their narration of the dialogue states how it's going to come out partially. They do exercise a lot of control. Their narration sets the tone, and they'll exclude people who don't follow their narration, their tone, as you can see in Ron Paul's campaign. They don't like to cover him properly. They talk about him as if he's unelectable, etc. How is he unelectable? We don't know. It's because they said so. But let's finish with this Donahue and Piers Morgan.
Norman Solomon has written a book which is War Made Easy. And essentially he says, if a president of the United States wants a war, he can have one. And I believe that totally. It's very, very hard to dissent think about what's against the person who wants to say, wait a minute, are you sure? Newt Gingrich said Ron Paul's positions are dangerous. So it's fear. We have to be tough. And we're killing our young adult children because of this.
What I've noticed about Americans and America when it comes to this kind of thing is that anybody that dares speak up against a war instantly gets labeled, bracketed, a pacifist, a coward, weak. And it's not really like that in many other countries. It's the kind of thing that mystifies me, because you don't have to be a pacifist to disagree with, say, the Iraq War.
Yes.
At all. I mean, it's not pacifism. It's pacifism if you say no war is ever acceptable. If you say Winston Churchill had no right, Neville Chamberlain had no right to have a war with Adolf Hitler, then that is pacifism to me at its weakest. It is a weak position. Of course you have to stand up to a dictator like that. But when it comes to issues like Iraq, incredibly important that the world's #1 military power, #1 political power, #1 economic power has a proper debate about whether they should go into these things without people being labeled a pacifist if they don't think it's a good idea.
You know, that's just one of the pushbacks. And by the way, I'm not brave enough to be a pacifist. I am, like millions of other Americans, very, very concerned about our foreign policy behavior over the past several years. And the way that the bedrock of this nation has been chipped away by the people who, democracy, and they're turning their back on the Bill of Rights. We have people in cages with no habeas, no phone calls, no Red Cross.
Guantanamo, you mean?
Yeah, this is not the country that my parents raised me to pledge my allegiance to. You know, you can't say you're a proud American and then waterboard somebody. You can't say you're a proud American and assassinate an American citizen in another country. Those are mutually exclusive ideas.
Yeah, so, I mean, Phil Donahue, he talks about, you know, these issues about Guantanamo, habeas corpus being taken away, indefinite detention, Patriot Act, torture, etc. You know, all these things, according to the Constitution, it's not allowed, but it's all done anyway to supposedly protect us. You know, there's no proof that, I say supposedly protect us because there's absolutely no proof that waterboarding or torture gets good information out of anybody. You know, it's just hard to believe that anybody would actually give real, live, true information after being tortured. It's just like something out of the movies. I mean, if I personally was working for any illegal group, if I was a person who did that, or quote a Muslim, jihadist, Al-Qaeda or whatever, I couldn't imagine that after they tortured me, that would cause me to give up the information that they were looking for. I'd be much more likely to give them false information than actual true information. I mean, these people believe in what they're doing, so why would they just give up information because they're being tortured? You know, it's too many Hollywood movies, which is a totally separate subject, but You know, that's part of what's wrong with America. I mean, a lot of this stuff is out of the movies. You know, the movies, they don't necessarily follow our rights. They take away our rights in the movies, and it becomes a reality. This is what our government is doing. You know, that life is imitating art. Life imitates the movies. Our government is imitating the movies, becoming what's going on in the movies. I mean, if you look back at the 9/11, that there were some movies prior to 9/11 that showed planes hitting skyscrapers in some type of terrorist plot. So it's just more insanity. Take away more and more rights, and we don't even discuss that war doesn't come free. We're already bankrupt, and we borrow and print billions to pay for these wars, while it doesn't accomplish anything. And there's so many American, primarily men, but women are over there too, so many young men being killed over there. So what is being accomplished over there? We got out of, finally, mostly got out of Iraq, though we have a large embassy staff there. Cost, I don't know, $1 billion or something. It's some large figure. I think it was $1 billion to spend to build a new embassy over there. So, you know, we're not totally through over there necessarily. Fortunately, most of the troops have been drawn down, though there are a lot of contractors over there. So, you know, this stuff is basically has already bankrupted our country with the combination of the large domestic spending and then the large defense military spending. We can't support it. The debt grows larger every year. President Obama has run deficits over $1.5 trillion every year, and it's just no end in sight to the wars overseas or to the large domestic spending. We got high unemployment, high inflation. Question is when and how will they ever solve these problems? Or do they have any intention of solving these problems, or is their only intention just to make them worse? We're going back and forth with Iran now. We don't know where that's going. If that's the next target to attack Iran. If we attack Iran, I mean, the price of oil is just going to soar out of control. So, and of course the economy, be extremely damaging to the economy for the price of oil to soar. Possibility of gas shortages, etc. There's no telling. Europe is on the edge of bankruptcy, collapse of the euro, the U.S. as well, and the U.S. government is ready to start another war with Iran. I mean, yes, the nuclear weapon, the possibility of Iran developing nuclear weapons is potentially threatening and destabilizing. But supposedly they may attack Israel, etc. But that's ignoring that Israel already has nuclear weapons. So they're supposed to have hundreds of warheads, nuclear warheads. So to think that Iran is just gonna start firing nuclear missiles at Israel is just crazy. Besides the fact that if Israel decides it's really, threatening, then they're free to attack Iran. They have the capability to attack Iran. And, I mean, Iran has basically already been under attack. Surreptitiously, is numerous Iranian scientists and an Iranian general killed, and the Stuxnet virus attacked their computers. Israel seems to have that situation under, at least partially under control. And they've definitely shown the capability to deal with Iran. There just isn't any proof that if we don't attack Iran, that something bad is going to happen. The war on terror just continues year after year, and there's no proof by bringing the troops back home that that's going to cause any terrorist attacks here in the U.S. Not at all. I mean, our government totally mishandled the 9/11 situation. It was never properly investigated. That our government mishandled the whole situation. Basically, it was incompetence on the part of our government, at a minimum incompetence, that caused the dire consequences. At the worst, could have been some type of complicity in what happened, since it was never properly investigated. They were supposed to examine it as a crime scene, which they never did. They shipped the steel back over. They shipped it over to China, where they melted it down instead of properly examining everything as a crime scene. So to think that we need to continue the war on terror overseas because of the incompetence at home in defending the homeland, that is incredible. To think that we need to bankrupt our country with troops overseas to defend our homeland. There's just no basis for that thinking. Conservatives and liberals need to open their eyes that bankrupting our country doesn't make us safer. They don't really believe. Our political leaders, many Americans understand that there is a major problem, but our political leaders and our media are our elite class, the establishment elite. These people are convinced that what we've been doing has to continue. No, but I didn't say that they're convinced that they're right. They're just convinced that these policies must continue. The same policies. They don't know that they're right. They just know that they must continue them to continue the status quo. And the establishment is always like that, to continue the status quo in any country. That's the functioning of an establishment elite, to continue the status quo. That's why when President Obama, before he took office, in his campaign, he made so many promises in relationship to our intervention overseas, bringing the troops home from Iraq, etc. But because President Obama was part of the establishment class, the elite class, he of course continued the status quo. That's the natural course of an establishment class, to continue whatever they've been doing. They've bankrupted our country. They've continued bankrupting our country. They print trillions of dollars to bail out the banks. They continue to print billions of dollars to bail out the banks. If there's another problem with the banks in the U.S., they'll just print and borrow trillions more. And the Federal Reserve has acted to help bail out the banks in Europe by loaning the European Central Bank trillions of dollars. It's all just a continuation of the previous policies under President Bush. We have basically a socialist, fascist, economic, foreign policy. The government interferes both domestically and overseas in the functioning of the free market and in the functioning also the free markets in overseas countries. Naturally, when we intervene, these foreign countries, their economies can't actually function properly because we're invading. So, I mean, and none of these policies really work, but they have to be continued because the previous administration did them. And if we elect, let's say, Mitt Romney, naturally, he'll have to continue these same policies of President Obama. He actually supported the bailouts and the stimulus. They say he's electable. Mitt Romney is electable. They also told us John McCain was electable. So, I mean, basically, it seems like the establishment has selected Mitt Romney to put him up against Barack Obama because they know that either way they win, they would prefer to see Barack Obama in there because he's one of them. He's more one of them. He's a liberal, so he's more one of them. Mitt Romney, if somehow he was to win against Barack Obama, it wouldn't be their first choice, but he would continue the same policies anyway, so that's perfectly okay if it came out that way. I mean, Mitt Romney can raise millions of dollars, and he's personally wealthy, so it's a possibility he could defeat President Obama, even though he is a weak candidate because he's advocated some of the same policies that President Obama has implemented and supported some of them, many of the same policies. So why not just go with President Obama? That's going to be most people's position. Why not go with the real, authentic liberal instead of going with the Republican liberal? So there's just no reason to think that Mitt Romney is going to be any more electable than John McCain. Because he's just such a similar candidate and has a history of flip-flopping. It's just the media keeps telling us that he's electable. He's electable because they told us he's electable. But when you compare him to John McCain, it's the same old liberal rhino ideas. So if John McCain couldn't beat President Obama, what's the reason to think that Mitt Romney can beat President Obama? Just because the economy hasn't been fixed. Obama has low approval ratings, etc. But he's going to raise millions of dollars and run a great campaign, I'm sure, against Mitt Romney. So it just isn't. We don't know how it's all going to come out. To say that just because Mitt Romney is running doesn't mean he's going to win it. You would think Mitt Romney was the coming of Jesus, or I don't know who. They talk about him as if he's the inevitable candidate, and if he runs against Barack Obama, he's so electable. It's not a foregone conclusion at all that Mitt Romney can win. Let's listen to the rest of this Phil Donahue.
Paul, I interviewed him yesterday. It's interesting you say this because his big thing, and I think it's an impressive thing to say, is he supports the Constitution.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
And for that, people call him crazy. And I'm watching this from the sidelines. I don't have a horse in the race. I'm
Isn't
British.
that amazing?
And I'm like, here's a guy who basically repeatedly says, I support the Constitution. And he's the one everyone calls cranky.
Mm-hmm. Yes, everything is turned upside down here. So Ron Paul's concern about our adventurism is, in Newt Gingrich's word, dangerous. Peace is dangerous. And the people who call for it are marginalized. We don't get it. We don't understand. Liberals are always scolding. I've had more than one person say, if a liberal complains about something, they will respond by saying, that's the trouble with you liberals. You don't like anything about America. So if you criticize America, it means you don't like anything. That's how they just push back.
Playing devil's advocate, though, I mean, isn't it also true that the right wing, the Republicans who espouse traditional social conservatism, they also get the same kind of caricaturing, don't they, by the left? I mean, it does work both ways.
Yes, it does. I agree.
Yeah, so that's Phil Donahue's take on it. Phil and Piers Morgan, but I mean, they're two liberals. But from a conservative perspective, spending billions or trillions of dollars overseas just isn't logical. That is real money that we're spending over there. Money that we have to borrow or print. So there just isn't any reason to think that those policies are in any way working and that we can continue to finance them. And that there's no reason that Mitt Romney or Barack Obama should be president to continue these policies. And there's no reason to think that Mitt Romney is going to in any way be able to manage the economy any better than Barack Obama. That's the real situation. That's it for right now. Thanks for listening.